The hum of fluorescent lights echoed softly in the empty hallways of NASA's research facility. It was a sound I had grown all too accustomed to over the years. I glanced at the clock on the far wall of my lab, 3:27 a.m. Another late night. No. Who am I kidding? Another late morning. The room was cluttered with schematics, half-empty coffee cups, and diagrams of dimensional physics, each more complex than the last. The soft hum of computers and the occasional flicker of the monitors were the only companions I had at this hour. I'd chosen this isolation. 10 years, 10 long years of failure after failure had led me here, to this moment of near breakthrough, the Stargate project, a concept that had lived only in the minds of visionaries and lunatics, now standing before me as an almost complete reality. The idea had once been simple: a gateway, a portal to the stars, capable of instantaneously transporting matter from one point in the universe to another, travel to distant planets, explore the far reaches of the cosmos, all without ever leaving the ground. The implications were revolutionary, except it didn't work. Or rather, it hadn't. Not yet. I ran a hand through my thinning hair, eyes fixated on the digital screen in front of me. Data streamed endlessly, calculations that had begun to blur together over the years. I could feel it in my gut. The solution was close, but the final piece kept eluding me. Every night I promised myself the same thing. This would be the breakthrough, the night I cracked it. And every night I left empty-handed, clutching at the same hope like a lifeline. I stood up and walked over to the large circular ring at the center of the lab. The Stargate. The device stood nearly 8 feet tall, a metallic frame inlaid with circuits and glowing runes that seemed to pulse with life. It was beautiful in its way, a triumph of engineering, and yet its secrets remained buried beneath layers of complex physics I couldn't yet decipher. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for another round of tests. The gate had to work. There was no other option. After a decade of my life devoted to this project, failure was no longer an acceptable outcome. Okay, let's try this again. My voice broke the silence, a futile attempt to convince myself that this time would be different. I typed a series of commands into the terminal, fingers moving with practiced precision. A low hum began to emanate from the gate, its once dormant circuits lighting up, casting an eerie glow across the lab. The air in the room seemed to shift, thickening with a palpable tension, as if the very atmosphere anticipated what was to come. The ring began to spin, slowly at first, and then faster, the lights intensifying as the machine worked to align with some distant, uncharted point in space. I held my breath, waiting for the familiar flicker of failure that always came next. But this time, nothing. No failure. No shutdown. The gate continued to spin, its power rising until the familiar ripple of energy shimmered into view within the ring's center. My heart stopped. The gate had stabilized, no shutdown, no power failure. It was working. I took a step back, eyes wide, not fully processing what I was seeing. A shimmering pool of light now filled the ring like liquid glass, rippling gently as if disturbed by an unseen hand. I stared into the glowing surface, feeling the pull of the unknown, of the endless possibilities that lay beyond. But before I could react, the sound of my lab door opening jolted me out of my trance. I turned sharply, heart pounding, only to find the last person I expected to see.
Dr. Cole, isn't it?
The voice was calm, self-assured, and distinctly feminine. A woman stood in the doorway, her silhouette outlined by the harsh fluorescent light from the hallway. She stepped into the lab, closing the door quietly behind her. The intrusion was casual, as though she belonged here. But she didn't. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail before landing on me. She was in her late 20s, early 30s maybe, with sharp features that suggested both intelligence and determination. Long, dark hair framed her face, and there was something unsettling about the confidence in her gaze, like she knew more than she should. "Who the hell are you?" I snapped, my nerves frayed from both the gate's success and the unexpected intrusion. She smiled, and it wasn't a friendly one.
Lena Hayes, journalist.
I stared at her, dumbfounded. A journalist, in my lab, at 3:30 in the goddamn morning. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, anger replacing the initial shock. This lab was supposed to be secure, protected by layers of clearance and classified files. No one, especially no journalist, should have been able to waltz in here like she owned the place. She ignored my question, her gaze shifting to the Stargate behind me.
"What is that?"
she asked, her voice dripping with curiosity. She stepped closer, peering at the rippling surface of the gate, as if drawn to it. "Stop!" I moved quickly, blocking her path. The last thing I needed was an untrained civilian getting too close to something we barely understood. "You don't know what you're dealing with."
"Oh, but I do."
She looked at me, her eyes glinting with a kind of predatory amusement.
"You see, Dr. Cole, I've been following your work for quite some time."
I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "What are you talking about?" She reached into her bag, pulling out a small recorder.
"The Stargate project."
She said casually, as if she were discussing the weather.
"You've been working on this for what, 10 years now? A top-secret NASA project to open portals to other planets? Pretty ambitious, even for you."
I felt my heart rate spike. How the hell did she know about the project? Everything was classified, buried under layers of secrecy. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. "I don't know what you think you know," I said, my voice low, "but you need to leave. Now." She didn't budge. Instead, she arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by my attempt to assert control over the situation.
"I think I know more than you'd like me to. And I think I'm not the only one who's curious about what NASA's really been up to all these years."
My mind raced, trying to figure out how much she knew, how much of a threat she posed. Whoever Lena Hayes was, she was no ordinary journalist. She'd gotten too close, far too close to secrets that could destroy not only the project, but everything I'd worked for. "This isn't something you can just write about in a blog post," I warned her. "What we're dealing with here, it's beyond you." Her expression softened, but only slightly.
"Then why don't you enlighten me?"
I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, a slow boil of frustration building in my chest. The Stargate was stable, rippling and glowing behind me, but I couldn't focus on the success, not with her standing here. Lena Hayes, a journalist? This was worse than I thought. People like her didn't just stumble into government facilities, let alone top-secret labs, without a reason. Her eyes lingered on the Stargate, curiosity and something else, determination shining in them. She looked back at me, as if she could read my thoughts.
"What is it, Dr. Cole? What are you so afraid of?"
She asked, her voice calm and measured. It wasn't a question, more of a challenge. "You don't belong here," I snapped, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. This is classified, and you're in way over your head."
"I don't think I am. You see, I've been digging into this for months. At first it was just rumors, NASA's secret experiments, unexplained anomalies, energy readings that made no sense. Then I found out about you."
She nodded toward me as if I were a puzzle piece she'd finally placed. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie came easily, but it felt hollow. She already knew too much. Lena crossed her arms, leaning against the edge of a nearby desk, all too comfortable in a place where she shouldn't be.
"The Stargate project. You've been trying to open a portal to other worlds, other dimensions. You think you found a way to travel instantaneously across the universe."
Her words hit like a punch, not because they were wrong, but because they were too close to the truth. "You don't have any idea what this project is about," I muttered, my eyes narrowing.
"Then explain it to me."
She shot back, her eyes blazing now.
Tell me I'm wrong.
I gritted my teeth, turning away from her. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to get her out of here without making a scene. I glanced at the terminal, the screen still displaying the stable readings from the gate. The energy levels were holding, but for how long? This was the closest I'd ever gotten to success. And now this journalist was here, threatening to derail everything. "I can't let you publish anything about this," I said, my voice a low growl. "You'll put yourself in danger, and not just from me." She blinked at that, her expression shifting slightly. I could see her trying to read between the lines of what I had just said.
Danger?
She asked, voice laced with curiosity.
From who? NASA? The government?
"There are things you don't understand," I warned her. "If you push too hard, you're going to get hurt." Her lips twisted into a wry smile.
You're going to have to try harder than that to scare me, Dr. Cole.
I clenched my fists, feeling the frustration boil over. "What do you want?" I barked. Lena's smile widened just slightly, knowing she'd gotten under my skin.
I want the truth, Dr. Cole. That's all. I think the public has a right to know what NASA's been hiding.
"You don't know what you're asking for," I said, shaking my head.
Then show me.
The room went silent for a moment. The only sound, the soft hum of the Stargate behind me. Her words hung in the air, a challenge I couldn't ignore. Show her? I stared at her, weighing my options. I could try to force her out, but she'd already seen too much. If she was as relentless as she seemed, she wouldn't stop until she had what she wanted. And yet, if I showed her the truth, would that silence her, or would it drag her in deeper? "You don't understand what you're asking for," I repeated, more to myself than to her.
Then help me understand.
The silence stretched between us, heavy and charged. Lena didn't move. She just stood there, calm, her eyes locked on mine, refusing to back down. She knew she had me. She could feel the tension in the air, and she was using it to her advantage. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to think clearly, but the last several hours of work had left me drained. The gateway was still open, waiting. It beckoned with the soft shimmer of liquid light, the portal to another world, maybe another planet, maybe something far worse. This was the breakthrough I had worked my entire career for, but I couldn't focus on it, not with her here. I turned to face her fully. "You have no idea what you're getting into." She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed.
I've been tracking this for months. I think I know more than you think.
"Do you? Do you really?" My voice was sharper now, the frustration bleeding into every word. "Do you know what's out there? What we've uncovered?" Her expression faltered for just a moment, but then the steely resolve returned.
I know that you've been lying to the world, hiding something that could change everything. And I know that you're afraid of the truth, afraid of what happens next. But the public deserves to know, and I'm going to make sure they do.
I sighed, turning my back on her, staring at the swirling portal before me. It was mesmerizing, the way the light danced across its surface, the ripples of energy distorting the air around it. I had been chasing this moment for years, and now I was standing on the precipice of discovery. But that discovery came with a price. I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm afraid of what happens when it's set loose. Lena didn't respond. Instead, I heard the soft click of her recorder as she turned it off and slipped it back into her bag.
Show me. Show me what you've been working on.
I hesitated. This wasn't just some story. This was the kind of knowledge that could break someone. Lena didn't know it yet, but she was on the edge of something far greater than she realized. Hours had passed since the encounter with Lena, and I hadn't seen her leave the facility. I had assumed she was long gone, but as the night stretched into early morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I stayed late, later than usual, poring over my data, tweaking the algorithms, recalibrating the machines. The Stargate was still stable, but I needed to understand why. Was it a fluke? A random event? Then, as if the universe was conspiring against me, I heard a sound. A faint rustling. My skin prickled. The facility was empty, or at least it was supposed to be. I turned slowly, scanning the room. For a moment I saw nothing, but then I spotted movement in the shadows near the far end of the lab, near my desk. Lena. She was here, again. I cursed under my breath. How had she gotten in? And more importantly, what did she think she was going to find? Quietly, I moved toward her, intending to confront her once and for all. But before I could say anything, she turned, and we locked eyes. She didn't look scared. No, if anything, she looked more determined than ever. "You're making a mistake," I warned, my voice low. She shook her head.
No, you are. You think you can keep this secret forever, but you can't.
The tension between us was suffocating, and before I could stop her, Lena moved toward the Stargate.
What is this?
She asked, her eyes wide with fascination.
You really did it, didn't you?
Lena, don't... But it was too late. She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the portal, and in that instant, the Stargate responded. The liquid surface rippled violently, glowing brighter, almost as if it was reacting to her presence. Before I could react, the entire room shifted. The walls seemed to bend inward, the lights flickering wildly, and the air became thick, charged with energy. My heart raced. The gate was reacting. Something was happening, something I couldn't control. "Get away from it!" I shouted, rushing toward her. But she didn't listen. She stood there, transfixed, her eyes locked on the glowing surface. And then, before I could stop her, she stepped forward, right into the Stargate. The moment Lena's fingers brushed the surface of the Stargate, the room seemed to shift. Like reality itself was bending around us. The lights flickered, and the gentle hum of the machines grew louder, vibrating with a strange intensity that hadn't been there before. The air felt charged, as if something had awakened. "Lena!" I shouted, trying to reach her before things spiraled completely out of control, but she was standing there, mesmerized by the rippling liquid surface of the gate. For a moment I thought she might step through, and the fear of losing her, or worse, letting her drag something back with her, sent a jolt of panic through me. I grabbed her arm, yanking her back from the gate. "What are you doing? You have no idea what's on the other side." She looked at me, eyes wide, half in awe and half in defiance.
And neither do you.
I exhaled sharply, realizing she was right. As much as I hated to admit it, I was no more certain of what lay beyond the gate than she was. All I had were theories. The gate was a one-way passage, but to where, and for how long? The unknown beckoned, both thrilling and terrifying.
I'm going through.
She said, her voice steady despite the tremor in the air.
And I'm taking you with me.
I stared at her, incredulous. You have no idea what could be on the other side. The atmosphere, the environment, it could be deadly. We need to prepare. Lena raised an eyebrow.
Then let's prepare.
The logical part of my brain kicked in. If we were going through the gate, we couldn't just dive in recklessly. The idea that the other side might not support human life was a very real possibility, and as much as I was curious, I wasn't suicidal. I pointed to the far side of the lab where several lockers were lined up against the wall. We'll need suits, NASA equipment, and oxygen tanks. I'm not risking stepping into a toxic atmosphere or a vacuum. Lena gave me a small nod, then followed as I led the way to the lockers. Inside were NASA's standard-issue environmental suits, designed for extraterrestrial exploration. The suits were equipped with built-in life support systems, including oxygen tanks and temperature control, meant to withstand harsh, unpredictable conditions. I had used them in simulations, but this was no simulation. This was real. I handed her one of the suits, and she eyed it for a moment, then started putting it on without hesitation. I did the same, fastening the seals, double-checking the oxygen supply and making sure everything was functioning properly. Focus. Stay calm. I repeated the mantra to myself as I secured the helmet over my head. The soft hiss of air filled my ears, the pressure of the suit settling in like a second skin. Lena followed suit, suiting up without complaint, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the oxygen tank. "Have you ever done anything like this before?" I asked, the tension between us shifting slightly as the situation grew more serious.
No,
She admitted, her voice coming through the suit's built-in comm system.
but there's a first time for everything.
"Not usually something you want to say when stepping into an interdimensional portal," I muttered under my breath. Lena chuckled, though the sound was hollow inside the helmet.
I've taken worse risks.
I doubted that. Nothing could compare to what we were about to do. Once we were fully suited, I turned back to the gate, which still shimmered and rippled with a surreal, otherworldly light. My heart was pounding in my chest, the enormity of what we were about to do hitting me all at once. "This is insane. Yes, the gate always returns you to Earth," I said, more to myself than to her. "But I'm not sure if there's a way back."
You said the gate always returns you to Earth, right?
"In theory, but I've never gone through it. No one has."
Well, now's your chance.
She stepped forward, her gloved hand reaching out once more toward the shimmering surface of the portal. I wanted to stop her, wanted to tell her to wait, but the truth was, I couldn't resist the pull either. Every part of my mind screamed at me to stay put, to retreat, but the obsession, the need to know, was stronger. Without another word, I followed her, and together we stepped through the Stargate. It was like being submerged in ice water, but without the cold. The sensation was jarring, disorienting, as if we were being pulled through a thin membrane between two realities. I couldn't see, couldn't feel anything but the pull, and then, suddenly, it was over. The world came back into focus. The first thing I noticed was the sky, a sickly, dim greenish gray with no clear source of light. The sun, if there was one, was hidden behind a thick veil of clouds. The air was still, unnervingly so, as though the atmosphere itself was waiting for something to happen. I blinked, my helmet fogging slightly as I tried to adjust to the strange surroundings. We were standing on what looked like soft earth, but the ground felt wrong beneath my boots, too soft, almost spongy. The landscape stretched out before us, endless fields of tall, dark grass swaying gently despite the lack of wind. In the distance, I could make out twisted trees, their branches gnarled and leafless, like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky.
Where the hell are we?
Lena asked, her voice echoing through the comm system. I don't know. My own voice was hoarse, the reality of the situation sinking in. I've never seen anything like this. The portal behind us shimmered faintly, but it was clear this was no ordinary place. It felt ancient, old beyond comprehension. There was a weight to the air, something oppressive that pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, even with the suit. Lena stepped forward, scanning the horizon.
Is this another planet?
"I don't think so," I said, shaking my head. "The data, it doesn't match anything we've ever recorded. It feels off." Lena glanced back at me.
Off how?
Like we're not supposed to be here. I turned slowly, taking in the surroundings, and that's when I saw it. A village in the distance, partially obscured by the mist that seemed to hang over everything. The buildings were old, crumbling, made of stone and wood like something out of the 12th century. That village, it looks abandoned. That's not a good sign. It proves there are creatures lurking in this place. Something about it felt deeply unsettling, and I couldn't shake the eerie sensation that we were being watched. We started toward the village, moving cautiously. The ground seemed to shift beneath our feet with every step, but there was no other choice. We had no idea where we were or how long the Stargate would remain open. As we approached the village, the feeling of being watched intensified. I glanced around, scanning the shadows between the trees and the dilapidated buildings, but saw nothing. Still, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. And then we saw them. Two figures stood at the edge of the village, partially obscured by the mist. They were small, children by their size, but their skin was an unsettling, sickly shade of green. Aside from that eerie hue, they appeared completely human. Lena stopped dead in her tracks, and I felt my heart skip a beat.
What the hell?
The children didn't move. They just stood there, watching us with eyes that seemed too large for their faces, their expressions unreadable. I took a step closer, my breath fogging the inside of my helmet as I tried to get a better look.
Dr. Cole, do you see what I see?
Yeah, I muttered, my voice tight. I see it. The children didn't speak. They just stared at us, unmoving, unblinking. And then slowly, one of them raised a hand, pointing toward the center of the village.
We need to go.
Lena whispered, her voice tense. But something told me we were already too late. The children didn't move. They stood there, statuesque, their eyes reflecting the faint, sickly light from the sky. Something about them felt wrong, unnatural. Their greenish skin, their small, frail forms, and the stillness that surrounded them like a shadow.
Who are they?
Lena asked, her voice hushed, like she didn't want the question to carry. I shook my head. I don't know. But this doesn't feel right. The air around us was thick, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing down on us, making every breath a little harder to take. My suit's oxygen supply hissed quietly in my ears, but the tightness in my chest wasn't coming from lack of air. It was the feeling of being watched, of being judged by something far beyond our understanding. Lena stepped forward cautiously, her hand resting on her helmet as if considering removing it.
Maybe they're lost.
She suggested, but there was no conviction in her voice. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Don't. We don't know what's in the air here. Keep your suit sealed. She hesitated, then nodded.
Right, sorry.
We stood there, watching the children, unsure of what to do next. That's when it happened. Without warning, the children screamed. It wasn't the cry of a child lost or in pain. No, this was something primal, raw, a piercing, high-pitched wail that cut through the air like a blade, making every nerve in my body flare with fear. The sound was unnatural, distorted, like it came from deep within their throats, but carried the weight of something much older, much darker. Lena recoiled, her hands instinctively going to cover her ears inside her helmet, even though the suit muffled the sound.
What the hell is happening?
She gasped, her voice shaking. I wanted to answer her, but the scream was so overwhelming, so invasive, it was all I could do to remain standing. My eyes locked on the children, their faces contorted, mouths wide open, releasing this otherworldly cry that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath us. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the scream stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I could feel sweat beading on my forehead beneath my helmet, and for a moment I thought I might pass out from the sheer tension. But that's when I saw them. Emerging from the mist that clung to the edges of the village, figures began to appear, silent, motionless, watching us with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. They were like the children, but larger, adults, their skin the same sickly green hue, their bodies tall and thin, clothed in rags and strange woven fabrics that looked ancient, yet functional. They surrounded us. Lena took a step back, her breath quickening as more of the green-skinned people emerged from the shadows. There were dozens of them, all with the same blank, unreadable expressions, their eyes wide and unblinking. They formed a loose circle around us, cutting off any path of escape.
We need to get out of here.
Lena whispered, but her voice was tinged with fear, as though she knew there was nowhere to run. I raised a hand, trying to show them we weren't a threat. We don't mean you any harm. I said, my voice steady, but my heart racing. I wasn't sure if they could understand me, but it was all I could do to remain calm. The green-skinned villagers didn't react. They just stood there, their eyes fixed on us, their stillness unnerving. The children had fallen silent, standing at the front of the group like sentinels, their heads tilted slightly, as if they were waiting for something. Suddenly, one of the taller figures stepped forward. He was older than the others, his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes held the same eerie glow. He wore a cloak of rough, tattered fabric, and there was a kind of authority in his bearing that marked him as someone important. The chieftain, I realized, their leader. He looked at us for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as they moved from me to Lena, then back again. His gaze lingered on our suits, the NASA emblem emblazoned on our chests, and something seemed to shift in his expression. Recognition. Before I could say anything, he spoke. The chieftain's voice was deep, gravelly, and the language he spoke was like nothing I had ever heard. It was harsh, guttural, with strange consonants and sounds that seemed to echo off the walls of the crumbling buildings around us. Whatever it wasn't any language I had come across in my years of study. Lena, beside me, shook her head, clearly as lost as I was.
What is he saying?
She asked, her voice tense. I don't know, I replied, frustration gnawing at me. It doesn't match any language I've encountered, but I think he knows something. The chieftain's eyes narrowed further, and he spoke again, this time louder, more insistent. The green-skinned villagers behind him shifted slightly, their eyes flicking toward the pit at the center of the village, then back to us. There was a sense of urgency in their movements, like they were waiting for something to happen. I glanced at Lena, my mind racing. We had to figure out what they wanted, why they had surrounded us, why they hadn't attacked or fled. But then the chieftain's eyes locked onto our suits again, and his next words sent a cold chill down my spine. Area 51. The words were unmistakable, clear as day despite the thick accent that coated them. Lena's eyes went wide and I could feel the blood drain from my face.
How does he know about Area 51?
Lena whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. I had no answer. The chieftain barked an order, and two of the larger villagers stepped forward, motioning for us to follow. They didn't appear hostile, but there was no mistaking the command in their eyes. We were to go with them. I don't think we have a choice, I muttered to Lena. She nodded, her face pale behind the visor of her helmet.
Area 51, what the hell does that mean?
I don't know, I said, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. But we need to find out. We followed the villagers through the misty village, past crumbling stone buildings and twisted trees, their gnarled branches stretching out like claws toward the dim sky. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something metallic, almost like blood. My heart raced, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but there was no going back now. We were too far in. The villagers led us to the largest building in the village, a structure made of stone and wood, ancient and crumbling but still standing. Inside, the air was cooler, and the walls were lined with strange symbols carved deep into the stone, symbols that pulsed faintly with a soft, greenish light. The chieftain stepped forward, his eyes scanning us once more. He spoke again, his voice low and filled with a strange intensity. Area 51, he repeated, pointing at our suits. You, from there. I stared at him, trying to piece together what he was saying, but my mind was racing too fast. How could they know about Area 51? How could this ancient, seemingly primitive village in another world possibly have any connection to one of the most secretive military bases on Earth? Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, human, but her presence here made no sense. My heart skipped a beat. She looked familiar, too familiar. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that held a glint of recognition, but I couldn't place where I'd seen her before.
Take off your helmets.
She said calmly in perfect English. Lena and I exchanged a glance.
What?
Lena asked, her voice muffled through her helmet.
There's oxygen here.
The woman explained, stepping closer.
Just like any other place on Earth, you don't need those.
I hesitated, instinctively protective of my suit, but something about her confidence, her familiarity, made me comply. Slowly, I unclasped the locks on my helmet and lifted it off, feeling the cool, damp air of the village settle around me. Lena did the same, her expression mirroring the confusion I felt. The air was breathable, as promised. But that wasn't the only shock. The woman smiled softly.
My name is Sarah.
She said, her voice steady.
I'll translate. There's a lot you need to know.
Lena narrowed her eyes, stepping forward.
Who are you? How do you speak English?
Sarah's smile faded slightly.
I'm like you.
She said cryptically, then turned to the chieftain, who had been watching us in silence. The chieftain spoke again in that strange, guttural language, his voice low and steady. The villagers around us remained still, their eyes reflecting the dim light of the chamber, watching us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Sarah began to translate.
We are the green race, but we are not different from you. We are as human as any other race. Long ago, we lived alongside the other human races, in what you call Area 51.
I frowned, the familiar name sparking a flood of questions in my mind. But Sarah continued before I could speak.
Area 51 is what you know as planet Earth. Every continent, every part of the sphere you're familiar with. It's all Area 51. We were placed there long before the boundaries were drawn. Before the ice walls rose, dividing the realm into separate sections. We were one of many races, but we were relocated, moved to Area 52, cut off from technology, from knowledge, from everything that defined us, forced to start over, as slaves.
Lena's mouth fell open and she shook her head in disbelief.
Slaves? Who did this to you?
The chieftain spoke again, his voice a harsh rasp. Sarah's expression darkened as she translated.
The ones who control our realm. They exist in all areas all over the world, the controllers. They are not human, but they walk among us, and they manipulate every part of our reality. We were placed here to serve them.
The room felt colder suddenly, the oppressive weight of her words sinking in. My mind reeled as I tried to piece together the implications of what she was saying. The realm, ice walls, controllers. None of it made sense, and yet there was something in Sarah's eyes that told me this was more than just a strange myth. Lena stepped forward, her voice shaky.
Wait, who are these controllers? What do they control? And why Area 51?
Sarah turned to her, her gaze steady.
Each area is controlled by different forces. In our area, it is the Reptilians.
I froze, the word hitting me like a sledgehammer. Reptilians. I had heard whispers of them before, wild conspiracy theories, stories passed around by fringe groups, dismissed by every credible scientist I'd ever worked with. Shape-shifting reptilian overlords who controlled humanity from behind the scenes. I had always thought it was nonsense. Until now. The chieftain spoke again, his voice growing more animated, and Sarah's face darkened as she translated his words.
They control us. They shapeshift, change their appearance, blending in with any race, any form. We fought back. We tried to resist, but their power, their technology, it's too strong. They are impossible to defeat.
Lena shook her head in disbelief.
Reptilians? Are you serious? You're telling me this is real?
Sarah's eyes softened with a kind of sad understanding.
I know how it sounds, but I've lived it. We've lived it.
The chieftain continued, his voice rising with a kind of quiet desperation. Sarah translated, her tone heavy with emotion.
They have placed us in these villages, keeping us here, only so we can continue to serve them. They control the technology, the resources, everything. We are trapped here, slowly dying out. Our race is headed for extinction.
Lena and I stood there, speechless, the weight of the revelation pressing down on us like a physical force. Extinction, a race of people trapped in a forgotten realm, enslaved by shape-shifting overlords. It sounded like a nightmare, a fever dream. But the fear in Sarah's eyes told me it was all too real. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from us?" Sarah looked directly at me, her gaze intense.
We need help. The science and technology from Area 51. What you have access to. It's the only chance we have left. You have the knowledge, the tools. Maybe, only maybe, you can help us fight back.
My mind raced, trying to process everything. The gate, the reptilians, the enslaved green-skinned people. It was all too much. I felt the ground shift beneath me, my vision swimming with the sheer impossibility of it all. Lena, however, seemed to find her voice.
Wait, how can we help? You're asking us to fight shapeshifters? With what? We barely even know where we are.
Sarah nodded solemnly.
I know, but you're the first outsiders we've seen in many years. You are from Area 51. They control the science, the technology. You must have some way of accessing it. Or at least, you have minds that can help us find a way.
My mouth went dry. The weight of what she was asking, what they were all asking, settled in my chest like a boulder. How could we help them? We were just two people, lost in a world we didn't understand, up against forces that defied everything I thought I knew about the universe. But there was no denying the desperation in the villagers' eyes. They had been fighting for survival, for their freedom, for who knew how long. And they were looking to us as their last hope. Lena looked at me, her expression a mixture of disbelief and determination.
Dr. Cole, what do we do?
I stared back at her, my mind reeling with the impossible decision laid before us. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice hoarse. "But we're in this now, and I don't think we have a choice." The air in the stone chamber felt thick, almost suffocating. My helmet was off, the coolness of the room mingling with the sweat on my forehead. It wasn't the temperature that unsettled me, though. It was the words. The impossible words Sarah had just spoken. They buzzed in my ears like a swarm of angry bees, their meaning refusing to settle in my mind.
We are from Area 51.
Sarah had said.
But everything you know about that place, about the universe, it's all wrong.
I shook my head, refusing to let the full weight of her statement sink in. "No," I muttered, more to myself than to her. That's ridiculous. This can't be right." Lena, standing beside me, crossed her arms, her expression one of disbelief and frustration.
Wait a minute. You're saying there are no other planets? No space? You're telling me NASA, every scientist on Earth, has been lying? That doesn't make any sense.
Sarah remained calm, her eyes steady as she looked at us.
They aren't lying. They just don't know.
"What?" I felt my pulse quicken, my mind spinning. "What are you even saying? I've dedicated my life to science, to understanding the universe. We've sent probes, satellites, people into space. I've seen the data, the images. The universe it's vast. There are billions of stars, planets, galaxies." Sarah smiled gently, but it was a smile laced with sadness.
That's what they want you to believe. That's what you've been taught. But it's not real.
I stepped back, shaking my head more vigorously, trying to cling to something, anything that made sense. No, that's impossible. The physics alone, the calculations, the curvature of the Earth. Space exists. I've spent my entire life studying it. Lena, though clearly disturbed, wasn't willing to accept this either.
What about astronauts? People have been to the moon. We've seen it. People can look through telescopes and see other planets. Are you seriously saying all of that is fake?
Sarah's expression didn't waver.
Not fake. Misunderstood. What you see, what you've been shown, it's part of the system of control. The Earth is much larger than you've been told. There are no planets, no galaxies beyond. Just the Earth, endless, vast, without boundaries, but divided.
Divided, I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. Divided by what? Sarah glanced at the chieftain, who stood silently, his green eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She then turned back to us, her voice softer now, as if explaining a deep, ancient truth.
By the controllers. They built the ice walls, separating the Earth into different areas, each one isolated from the others. You've been led to believe that Earth is just one small planet in a massive universe. But the truth is, the Earth is the universe. There is no space beyond it.
The room felt like it was spinning. My head swam as Sarah's words collided with everything I had spent my life believing. No, that doesn't fit with any of the laws of physics, with anything we know about the universe. Sarah tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering.
Who do you think taught you those laws?
I blinked, feeling the ground tilt beneath me. What?
The controllers. They control everything. Your science, your education, your governments. They have fed humanity a false reality, keeping you all trapped within the boundaries of the Earth without ever knowing the truth.
Lena let out a harsh laugh, a sound filled with disbelief.
Okay, hold on. Are you telling us that the entire human race is living in some kind of giant bubble, and that the universe is just Earth?
Yes. A realm with no boundaries, no limits, except those imposed by the controllers. They've kept humanity divided in the dark for thousands of years.
No, I said, my voice trembling with anger now. That's insane. You're talking about what? A conspiracy on a global scale? No. Larger than global, universal. This doesn't make sense. The moon landings, the space stations, the satellites, everything we've done to explore space. How do you explain that? Sarah stepped closer, her voice calm but insistent.
You've never been to space. None of you have. The controllers manipulate what you see, what you experience. The sky, the stars, they are projections, illusions designed to keep you believing in a false reality.
I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Projections, illusions. It sounded insane. This was the kind of thing conspiracy theorists babbled about on fringe websites. And yet standing here in this strange, otherworldly village, with people who clearly didn't fit into any known history or civilization. I couldn't deny the possibility that there was more at play than I understood, but I refused to let go. No, I said again, though the conviction in my voice was faltering. I've seen the stars. I've studied them. The distance between Earth and other planets, the speed of light, the cosmic background radiation. There's too much evidence. You can't just explain all of that away. Sarah nodded.
I understand why it's difficult to accept. Your entire life has been built on these ideas. But the controllers have more power than you can imagine. They've shaped your reality, your understanding of the world, of the universe, so that you remain trapped in your area, believing that there's nothing else. The firmament, it surrounds this realm. It's an impenetrable barrier that even the controllers cannot cross. It's what keeps us all here, separated in these different areas. No one, not even the most powerful controllers, can pass through it.
Lena's face twisted in disbelief.
So what? You're saying that all of our technology, all the science that's been developed over centuries, is just wrong? That the Earth isn't a planet at all, but some kind of contained world broken up into sections?
Exactly,
Sarah said. I took a step back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The room felt like it was closing in around me. No, this can't be. Sarah looked at me with a kind of quiet empathy.
I know it's hard to accept, Dr. Cole. You've built your life on the pursuit of knowledge, of understanding the universe. But the truth is, the universe isn't what you think it is. Earth is all there is, and it's been divided and controlled for centuries.
I wanted to scream, to shout that it wasn't true, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself spiraling deeper into a sense of confusion, of loss. Everything I had studied, everything I had worked for, everything I believed, was it all a lie? Was my entire understanding of reality just a fabrication, designed to keep us trapped? Lena looked over at me, her expression a mix of disbelief and fear.
Dr. Cole, what if she's right?
No, I whispered, my voice barely audible. No, she can't be. But even as I said the words, I could feel the foundations of my worldview cracking, crumbling beneath the weight of a truth too enormous to comprehend. The Earth. No boundaries, no space, no universe beyond what we had been shown. I looked back at Sarah, her face calm and composed, and in that moment I felt the ground give way beneath me. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. The air in the village was stifling, pressing down on me with a weight I could barely comprehend. I still couldn't shake the hollow feeling in my chest after everything Sarah had revealed about the Earth, the controllers, the firmament. The sheer impossibility of it all rattled through my mind like a storm, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on to what I thought I knew, it was slipping away. But there was no time to process, no time to breathe. The village's quiet oppression was only the beginning. Sarah had insisted that we couldn't fully understand what we were up against, what Area 52 truly was, until we saw it with our own eyes. And so, we prepared to leave the village. Lena was pacing, glancing between me and Sarah, her face pale but her determination evident.
So what exactly are we going to see out there?
She asked, pulling her hair back into a tight ponytail. Her voice was shaky, but she was trying to keep it steady.
I need to know what we're getting ourselves into.
Sarah stood near the entrance to the stone building, watching us with a mixture of sadness and resolve.
You're going to see the truth. You'll see how the Reptilians have turned this land into a prison. You'll see what we've been fighting against.
The chieftain, who had remained silent throughout most of the discussion, stepped forward and spoke in his guttural language. Sarah nodded and translated.
He says you need to understand that leaving the village isn't safe. The Reptilians patrol the outer regions. They watch us constantly. If they see you, they will know you're not from here.
I nodded, feeling the heavy weight of the task ahead settle on my shoulders. What do they look like? I asked, my voice hollow. Sarah's expression darkened.
They can look like anything, anyone. They're shapeshifters. They change their form to blend in with whatever human race they need to control. But they can't disguise their eyes. They're real eyes. If you're close enough, you'll see them. They're reptilian, cold, inhuman.
Lena crossed her arms, a skeptical frown on her face.
Okay, so we're going into an area controlled by shapeshifters who can pass as human. Sounds great.
I looked at her, my mind still racing with everything we'd learned. We don't have a choice. We need to see this for ourselves. The cold stone walls of the room seemed to close in around me as we prepared for what was next. The village had been a small bubble of strange, stifling oppression, but stepping outside meant walking directly into the heart of the reptilian-controlled area. And for that, Sarah had told us, we couldn't look like outsiders. She stood by a wooden chest at the corner of the room, pulling out dark, heavy robes and sets of small, eerie contact lenses. Black lenses that would cover the whites of our eyes and mask any trace of humanity in our gaze.
You'll need to wear these,
she said, her voice steady as she handed the lenses to Lena and me.
The Reptilians won't recognize you if you wear their cloaks and hide your eyes. They've kept these uniforms for secret missions, and we've used them before to infiltrate their outposts.
Lena held the lenses up to the dim light, her expression uneasy.
I've worn contacts before, but these look creepy as hell.
They're necessary. The Reptilians may be able to change their appearance, but their eyes are always different. If they look into yours and see anything human, they'll know something's wrong.
I stared at the black lenses in my palm, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. So, If we pass as them, we'll be able to move freely?
For the most part.
Sarah said, turning toward the bundles of clothes she had laid out.
But don't draw attention to yourselves. Reptilians are suspicious by nature, and any strange behavior could give you away. Stay close, keep your heads down, and act like you belong.
Lena shot me a look.
So, just like sneaking into a government building without a clearance badge. Got it.
I managed a grim smile. Exactly. We donned the robes, their material heavier than I expected, with a strange synthetic texture that felt almost alive against my skin. The hoods draped over our heads, casting deep shadows across our faces. Once the robes were secured, I carefully placed the black lenses over my eyes. The world grew darker, and when I looked in the cracked mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were black and hollow, like the reptilian overseers we had seen watching the green-skinned workers. Lena adjusted her hood, her own eyes now hidden beneath the lenses. She looked at me, her expression unreadable behind the disguise.
Do I look terrifying enough?
She asked, her voice light but strained.
You'll blend in.
Sarah assured her, already wearing her own cloak.
Now let's move. We need to see what's happening in Area 52, and you need to understand the full scale of what we're up against.
The moment we stepped out of the village and into the expanse of Area 52, the scale of the place hit me like a wave. It was like nothing I'd ever seen, like something out of a dystopian future that we, as humans, could barely dream of achieving. Towering structures made of sleek, gleaming metal rose up on the horizon, their surfaces covered in strange glyphs and glowing lines of energy. Hovering drones patrolled the skies, their mechanical eyes scanning the area below with a cold, dispassionate precision. The ground itself seemed to hum with energy. Beneath the cracked, barren earth, I could see pulses of light, strange grids of power running through the ground like veins of electricity, connecting the buildings and fueling whatever dark machinery the reptilians use to control this land.
Keep close,
Sarah whispered, pulling her hood lower over her face as we approached a massive industrial complex. They won't notice us if we stay quiet. As we moved closer, I could see the reptilian patrols, hulking figures in dark robes, their heads covered by metallic helmets that masked their features. They moved with a cold, methodical precision, their eyes, those unmistakable reptilian eyes, scanning the area constantly, searching for anything out of place. My heart pounded as we walked past them, their towering forms just inches away. My eyes stayed down, focused on the ground, but I could feel their gaze brushing over us. One wrong move, one mistake, and they would know. They would know we didn't belong. I could hear the low hum of the reptilian machinery, massive futuristic machines that dwarfed any technology I had seen back home. They were sleek, silent behemoths, working without pause, controlled by some unknown force. Conveyor belts moved endless lines of materials, metal, stone, glowing crystals, into towering factories that seemed to stretch into the sky itself. "This is incredible," I muttered under my breath, trying to keep my voice low. "Their technology, it's like something out of a science fiction movie."
It's far beyond anything humanity has. They've had this technology for centuries, long before humans were even aware of electricity. The controllers gave it to them, allowing them to dominate their areas and keep the rest of us under control.
Lena was silent, her gaze darting around, taking in everything. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. This wasn't just a factory. This was an entire world, an empire, built on the backs of enslaved people. We passed groups of green-skinned workers, their faces expressionless, their eyes hollow as they labored under the oppressive gaze of the reptilian overseers. There were hundreds of them, all moving in perfect synchronization, lifting heavy loads, operating advanced machinery they clearly didn't understand. It was a brutal, mechanical system, devoid of any humanity.
Is this what you've been living with for 5 years?
Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah nodded.
Yes, this is what they do. They strip the land of resources, using the people as little more than tools. If you step out of line, if you resist, they take you. They reprogram you, change you.
My fists clenched under the robes. How have they kept this hidden for so long? Why doesn't the world know about this?
Because of the ice walls. The controllers built them centuries ago, isolating each area. They control everything. They control what your governments know, what your scientists believe. No one has crossed the ice walls in over 100 years.
But you crossed them, didn't you?
Sarah's eyes darkened, and for the first time since we'd arrived, I saw a flicker of pain in her gaze.
Yes, I was sent here on a secret mission.
We moved behind a row of large containers hidden from view as Sarah spoke. Her voice was low, steady, but I could hear the weight of her past in every word.
I worked for NASA. I was an astronaut. I trained for years, but I never went to space. I never left Earth. Instead, I was chosen for a different kind of mission, one that very few people know about.
Lena's eyes widened.
Wait, NASA sent you here? Beyond the ice walls?
Sarah nodded, her face pale in the dim light.
Yes, it was a secret mission, sanctioned by the US government. We were sent to explore the areas beyond the ice walls, to find out what the controllers were hiding. I was part of a team, 6 of us. We were told there were other areas, other civilizations, and we needed to gather information.
I felt my pulse quicken. But you never came back. Sarah's expression tightened.
No, we were captured. The Reptilians found us as soon as we crossed into Area 52. They killed the others, but I was spared. They kept me here in this village. They wanted to know why NASA had broken the deal.
Deal?
Yes. NASA had an understanding with the controllers. No one was supposed to cross the ice walls. No one was supposed to know the truth about the different areas. But my mission, it broke that agreement. And now they've been watching, waiting to see if more would come.
She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly.
Which brings me to you. How did you get here? Did NASA send you like they sent me?
I froze, her question hanging in the air like a loaded weapon. I could feel Lena's gaze on me, waiting for my answer, but I didn't know what to say. Should I tell her the truth? That we hadn't been sent by NASA at all, that I had opened the Stargate by accident, driven by my own obsession? Or should I lie, keep the truth hidden until we knew more? I began, my voice faltering. Lena shifted beside me, her eyes hard.
Dr. Cole, now's not the time to be cryptic.
I swallowed hard, avoiding Sarah's piercing gaze. We weren't sent by NASA, I said finally, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. We found our way here through different means. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, and I could see the confusion flicker across her face.
Then how did you get here?
We used a Stargate, Lena said bluntly. He built it. At least, that's what he's been working on.
I shot her a sharp glance, but she didn't flinch. Sarah's expression darkened.
A Stargate? You opened one?
Yes, I admitted reluctantly. I've been working on it for years. I never expected it to bring us here. For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Then she nodded slowly, as if piecing together some unseen puzzle.
It makes sense now. The controllers have been worried about something like this. They knew there were people on the outside, people like you, who could find a way in. Lena stepped closer, her voice firm.
So, what do we do now? How do we help? Sarah looked at us, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear.
You help by doing what they fear the most. You disrupt the system, you fight back.
The farther we moved from the village, the more surreal the landscape became. Sarah led us through a winding path of broken earth and metallic ruins, her pace quick and sure, but her eyes always scanning the horizon for signs of danger. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, the weight of the disguise heavy on my shoulders, but my curiosity drove me forward. I needed to understand this place. "This is what Area 52 looks like," I muttered, my voice barely audible under the weight of the reality around me. Sarah turned slightly, her dark hood casting shadows across her face.
Yes, this area is divided between small, scattered villages where the green race lives and the cities where the Reptilians control everything.
We passed through more barren land, the cracked ground giving way to strange, pulsing energy grids that seemed to light the way toward the towering cities in the distance. The contrast between the desolate villages and the high-tech cities was impossible to miss. I could see one such city now, dark, monolithic towers piercing the sky, connected by glowing bridges of light and mechanical arms that stretched out like fingers, weaving between the buildings. Strange aerial crafts buzzed around the city like insects, hovering over the intricate web of technology that made up the reptilian world. It was more advanced than anything I'd ever seen, far beyond human technology. Lena, her hood pulled low over her blackened eyes, whispered next to me.
This place, it's like something out of a nightmare. How could they keep this hidden?
They've been controlling it all for centuries.
Sarah answered softly, glancing toward the distant city.
They have ways of ensuring no one outside the ice walls knows the truth. The controllers isolated each region with those boundaries, and no one has been able to cross. The Reptilians rule over Area 52, and this is the world they've created. Villages where the green race serves, and cities where the Reptilians reign, wielding technology we can barely comprehend.
Lena nodded grimly, her eyes darting from the towering structures to the beaten-down green-skinned workers trudging across the landscape.
So the villages, they're just used for labor?
Yes. They extract resources from the land, building their cities, strengthening their hold. Every village has its role. Some work the fields, some build weapons, others mine for rare minerals. The Reptilians never let the villages near their cities. That's where they keep their technology. And that's where they maintain their control.
I stared at the city in the distance, my mind spinning. Area 52 is the same size as Area 51, I mean the Earth we know, right?
Yes, that's what I've been told. Area 52 stretches far beyond what you've seen here. It's vast, divided into different regions, much like Area 51. But here, the Reptilians control everything. They monitor every village, every movement. The technology they use is designed to keep the people under their thumb, to make sure no one tries to rebel.
I took a deep breath, my eyes tracing the massive structures ahead of us, the gleaming towers, the alien machines. It was all so far beyond what I'd ever imagined. And no one's ever been able to escape?
We've tried. Many have tried. The green-skinned people have staged surprise revolts, but every time they rise up, they're crushed by the Reptilians' advanced technology. Their weapons are too powerful, their surveillance too vast. And when someone defies them, they disappear. No one comes back.
The weight of her words settled on me like a stone, the grim reality of this place, pressing in from all sides. This wasn't just about science, about understanding the universe. This was about survival, about breaking free from a system of control that had been in place for centuries. But could we help? Could our knowledge really make a difference against an enemy so far beyond anything we'd ever faced? Lena's voice cut through my thoughts.
So what now? We just keep moving and hope they don't notice us?
Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon again.
We need to stay out of sight. The Reptilian patrols are everywhere. If they find us...
She stopped abruptly, her body going rigid. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. In the distance, closing in fast, was a Reptilian patrol. A group of 4 figures, tall and imposing, their dark cloaks billowing as they moved with swift, purposeful strides. Their cold Reptilian eyes gleamed under the dim light, scanning the area with a precision that made my blood run cold.
They're coming this way.
Lena whispered, her voice tight with fear. Sarah's expression darkened.
Stay calm. Keep your hoods up and your eyes low. If they think you're one of them, they'll pass right by.
We nodded, falling into step behind Sarah as she continued to lead us down the path. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last as the patrol drew closer. The wind seemed to still, the air growing heavier with every step. They were close now, too close. I kept my eyes down, my hood low, but I could feel their presence like a weight pressing against my chest. The ground beneath my feet seemed to vibrate with the hum of their technology, the air around us thick with tension. We walked in silence, our footsteps barely making a sound as we passed through the shadow of the towering city. But then, the Reptilians stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I could hear the soft murmur of their voices, low, hissing sounds that sent a chill down my spine. One of them stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he turned toward us, suspicion etched across his reptilian features. I dared not look up, my hands trembling beneath the cloak. If they saw through our disguise, if they realized who we really were. Sarah's voice was calm but firm.
Don't react, keep moving.
We kept walking, our pace steady, but the reptilian who had stepped forward wasn't moving. His eyes were fixed on us, and I could feel the scrutiny in his gaze, sharp and calculating.
Something's not right.
Suddenly, the reptilian patrol leader spoke in a guttural alien tongue, a command. His voice was cold, dripping with authority.
They've seen us. Don't stop. Don't.
But it was too late. The patrol surged forward, their heavy steps thundering against the ground, their cloaks billowing like dark storm clouds. The leader grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, and wrenched me toward him. I stumbled, my hood falling back slightly, and for a brief moment our eyes met. I saw it in his gaze. Recognition. He knew we didn't belong. A sickening sense of dread washed over me as the reptilian leader barked another command. His hand tightened around my arm, and I could feel the raw strength in his grip. This wasn't just a warning. They were taking us. Lena gasped, trying to pull away from one of the reptilians who had grabbed her, but it was no use. Their strength was overwhelming. They moved with the precision of soldiers, their cold eyes gleaming with triumph as they dragged us toward their waiting vehicle. Panic surged in my chest. "Sarah!" I shouted, my voice cracking. Sarah tried to resist, but she was quickly overpowered.
We've been compromised. They know they...
Before she could finish, the reptilian leader pulled something from his cloak, a sleek metallic device, and pressed it against my neck. I felt a sharp sting, followed by a wave of darkness washing over my senses. My body went limp, and I fell to the ground, my vision fading. The last thing I heard before everything went black was Lena's voice, a single, terrified cry echoing through the air. To be continued.